And then Michael Jordan, he was Player of the Year in '83 as a sophomore, and then a junior. They had the best team in the country, and Kenny Smith was their freshman point guard. He got injured against Arkansas, broke his wrist, and he came back, and he was never the same. And I'll never forget it because I was there in 1984. A very mediocre Indiana team beat Sam Perkins, Michael Jordan in the Sweet 16. And Dean Smith, in his post-game press conference, basically said a few things and said, "I know I've got things to do, and you've got things to do too." And he just walked out, and everybody was just stunned. I mean, Dean Smith was stunned that they had lost this game. The whole Carolina family was.
And, of course, Coach K followed under, of course, the General Bobby Knight. So, I've read in several interviews and saw on Sports Center, not Sports Center, but Sports Century, that Coach K in the locker room, he kind of has a side you really don't want to see, especially if you're in his doghouse.
Oh, well, Coach K can get on you. There's no question about that. And can you imagine, Jarrell, Coach K went to the U.S. Military Academy, and to be under that rigid, the discipline they have as a cadet at the Army, and playing for Bob Knight at the same time. Can you imagine what he had to go through? And this was a young Bob Knight, and Bob Knight, when he was young, he was more ferocious than he ever was. As he got older, he was still pretty ornery, but back when he was young, boy, he got after you. Imagine that, and that's where Coach K got some of his fire.
Yeah, I probably couldn't play.
I've met them both, and Coach K is a much nicer man than Bob Knight.
Yeah, I probably couldn't play under Bobby Knight because he's definitely has that old school Vince Lombardi, old football coach mentality where I'll say something to you, and if it's not PC, if you don't like it, you put it where the sun don't shine.
Well, you said you couldn't play for him, and that was probably his problem. Later, in his latter years at Indiana and at Texas Tech, he couldn't get the blue chip players to come play for him because it took a special kind of guy to want to have to go through all that stuff. Because Bob Knight didn't pass out compliments very easy.
And like the same thing, well, a lot of people wanted to play for Wooden, but Wooden kind of had it super strict because I saw in the special about UCLA that how you couldn't have your hair a certain length, your uniform has to look like this, and I think Bill Walton said he wanted to keep his facial hair or something, and he was like, we're gonna miss you, Bill. And
well, it's an interesting thing about John Wooden. John Wooden was a gentleman. John Wooden did not curse. But he was an excellent ref baiter. He would sit there on the bench, looking like a minister, and he'd have his program folded, and he would subtly dig at the refs, but nobody ever knew it. And he had some great teams. The '64, in '64 he won his first national championship, beating Duke in the championship game, 98-83. Next year in '65 he beat Michigan. '67 was when he had the freshman Lou Alcindor, later Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And for those next 3 years, they lost a total of 2 games. And then when Jabbar left to show what the kind of coach and recruiter he was, he won without him. Between Jabbar and Walton, he had 2 national championships, and then Walton came in '72, and they reeled off, that 88-game winning streak, which was just phenomenal. And here's the thing, though, in '74, and this is interesting. This is when John Wooden knew he was kind of losing control. Walton was his star player, and Bill Walton came up to Wooden, and this was, like during the season, said, "Coach, I want to smoke marijuana." And Wooden said, Bill, you can't do that. And he says, "Well, I'm going to do it anyway." And Wooden just sighed and said, "Well, if you're going to do it, don't tell anybody." And Wooden said he knew right then he had lost this team. And this was a UCLA team that by all rights probably should have been undefeated again. NC State won the national championship, but UCLA probably had better players, even though David Thompson was phenomenal, as was Tommy Burleson. But they played... State and UCLA played in the semifinals in Greensboro, and State was down by 7 points in the second overtime, and State was coming back on UCLA, and Wooden looked over at the bench and signaled, "Coach, do you want us to call timeout?" And Wooden didn't look at him. It was kind of like him telling Bill Walton, "You guys got yourself in this trouble. You get yourselves out of it." And State won the national championship that year, ending UCLA's long run.
And who knew that the good old ball coach, Steve Spurrier, was the football coach at Duke and started airball?
Steve Spurrier, I think, is proud of anything he accomplished. Was winning the ACC football championship, sharing it with Virginia in 1989. Because if you could win a football championship at Duke, that was an accomplishment, and he did it. He had 3 pretty exciting years at Duke University that went on, of course, to great success at Florida, and of course he hasn't done much for us lately, though, has he?
No, you're at South Carolina now. At REL, did you ever run into Stuart Scott while he was working there, and did you know then that he was going to be as popular as he is now on ESPN?
Stuart was a news reporter at WRAL TV. A lot of people don't know that. He wanted to get into sports, but we didn't have an opening, so our news director hired Stuart as a news reporter. And I think his the years he spent as a news reporter really helped prepare him journalistically, for ESPN. And from our place, he went to Orlando, and then he ended up at ESPN. And Stuart was a great guy. He was a lot of fun. He was very athletic. And I remember one time Stuart was just standing there, and I put it on my Plays of the Week segment. He did a standing backflip. I mean, and that's athleticism if you can do that. Stuart was a really, really good guy, and his mother still lives in Raleigh.
Wow.
And I ran into her in the grocery store the other day, and it was, just really fun. I said, you've got to be just so proud of Stuart.
Now, back to Football Friday. Was there ever one team from one specific year that stood out that pretty much every time they stepped out on the field, they pretty much demolished the competition?
Well, the team I probably remember the most, and and it all kind of runs together. There have been so many. Has to be the Anthony Barber-led Garner team of 1987. And Anthony Barber scored. He later went on to be All ACC at State. Now he's the head football coach at Smithfield Selma High School. But his Garner team went undefeated. Anthony scored 47 touchdowns his senior year. And this was a Garner team that wasn't very big. But, boy, led by Barber, who was just so quick, Jarrell, just an amazing high school running back. That's the team of all the teams that I can recall in all the years we've been covering high school football that just sticks out of my mind just immediately.
The last day when you did the newscast, tell me about that, because I was at home and I saw the newscast, and for me, it felt like, Tom Suter is stepping down. For me, it was like, I grew up watching you on Channel 5 doing Sports and Football Friday. So for me and other people around the viewing area, it was like, oh, Tom Suter's leaving. It was a sad day.